Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this webinar on Europrivacy certification, integrating GDPR with national privacy laws. I'm Alan Calder, I'm your host for today. I'm going to briefly introduce myself on the next slide, and I'm going to hand over to Dr. Sébastien Ziegler, who I'm delighted to welcome onto the webinar today, who's going to briefly introduce himself. I'm then going to run through the plan for the day, and then Sebastian's going to talk to us all about Europrivacy certification. Sebastian, if you could flip on to the next slide. That's me. I'm the Chief Executive of ERC Group, International Group, and the founder of IT Governance, which is one of the world's leading providers of GDPR, privacy, and ISO 27001 services. We have a comprehensive range of products and services that help organizations who want to not only be compliant, but demonstrate to clients and stakeholders that they are in fact compliant. I've been in this industry for some 25 years, written a number of books around governance, cybersecurity, GDPR, privacy. I've been involved with many different organizations of different sizes in many continents, helping them put effective, sensible, practical compliance frameworks in place. So that's me. The next slide is Sebastian's self-introduction. So Sebastian, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So thank you very much, Alan, for this kind invitation. It's a great pleasure to join you on this webinar. So my name is Sébastien Ziegler. I have the pleasure and honor to chair the Europrivacy International Board of Experts, which is in charge of maintaining and overviewing the use of Europrivacy as a European data protection seal. I will skip the order element. It's, again, a great pleasure to join you and to give the floor back to Alan, I think, to set
So thank you, Sebastian. So IT Governance, we are a Europrivacy official partner, a global official partner around Europrivacy. We have multiple frameworks and standards in our armory, which indicate the level of focus in our business on quality of services. Our NPS score is an indicator of the extent to which our customers recognize that what we do is, broadly speaking, world-class, as does our Trustpilot scoring. So organizations dealing with us come to us because they know that what they're going to get from us is consistent, solid, not only expertise, but expertise delivered in a way that is really focused on the needs of our clients and customers. The next slide is a summary of what we're going to be covering today, the agenda. So a brief introduction to Europrivacy certification, how that can work inside, for many organizations, their current privacy framework, how GDPR intersects with national and local privacy legislation, the challenges and advantages for organizations operating in multiple European countries where, while GDPR is a single law across all of the European Union, it's not necessarily the same law in countries outside of the European Union, and you have many organizations looking for evidence that their suppliers are in fact GDPR compliant. So strategies for using Europrivacy to address diverse regulatory demands and how Europrivacy certification can help unify compliance efforts across borders. While I'm your host today, substantially the whole of this presentation is going to come to you from Sebastian. You will all have noticed that you're on mute. That's deliberate so that we can cut out background noise and so on. But please, if you find you have questions as we go through this webinar, do ask them. And the way to ask them is to ask the question in the question function. So in the top ribbon of your GoToWebinar screen, you'll see a small box with a question mark in it. If you click on that, you'll find that there is an opportunity to type questions into that. Please do put the questions in there as and when you think there is a question you want to ask. When we come to the end of what Sebastian and I have prepared to say to you, which will be about 50 minutes or so, 55 minutes from here, I'll then share with you whatever questions there are, and then Sebastian or I, as is most appropriate, will answer the questions. Everyone knows what the question is and what the answer is. Aiming to be complete by on the hours, so by midday British summertime, 1 o'clock European standard time, European summertime, we should be all finished. And on that note, I'm going to hand you over to Sébastien. All yours, Sébastien.
Thank you very much, Alan. So I was invited to explain and to discuss a little bit the interplay between the European Data Protection Seal, the Europrivacy certification, and the interplay with national regulation, and a little bit what is the context? And let's start maybe by the basics. Why certification? Why is certification useful? That was one of the questions I was requested to answer. So uh, fundamentally, under the GDPR, there is already a bit of answer which is explained. It's to enhance transparency and compliance with the regulation, allowing data subjects to quickly assess the level of data protection of relevant products and services. So that's in the Recital 100 of the GDPR. And more specifically in Article 42, it is stated that GDPR certification is about demonstrating compliance with the regulation of processing operations by controllers and processors. So it's fundamentally about legal compliance. So contrary to other certification where, for instance, if you take ISO 27001, which is very useful, but it's a certification which is somehow autonomous, which has its own referential. While with data protection certification or compliance certification, what is intended under GDPR, but also the UK GDPR or other regulations like the Swiss Federal Act on Data Protection. It's very much about demonstrating compliance with a legal norm. So it's about legal compliance. There's no compromise. Not that you can change your criteria. You need really to align your criteria with what is expected by the law, by the regulator. It's also about evolving requirements, so something which is a kind of moving target because you may have jurisprudences, you have soft law, for instance, in the EU you have the EDPB guidelines, which are approved regularly to clarify the interpretation of the GDPR and to adapt the norm to the evolution of the legal and technological environment. And then another aspect which characterizes the GDPR certification or the European certification or European Data Protection Seal is the large diversity of data processing. So if we look now maybe at one of the reasons why a certain number of entities are and more entities are interested in certification is precisely due to the fact that the certification, if you compare it, for instance, to other Article 46 mechanisms, is far more comprehensive. It relies on effective control, on-site control, independent third parties audits. It's focused on specific theories, so we can really ensure compliance with the theory. It's applicable to all kinds of data processing on all kinds of data control and data processor. And another way to see it is, so there is a new standard which was developed in a European research project named AD4GD, which has been standardized by the European Centre for Certification and Privacy, which is the trust scale level, which enables to assess when you use a mechanism or you plan to transfer data to controller or to a processor, if you're a controller planning to share data with a processor, to assess the level of trustability or reliability you may consider in the adequacy of the receiving party, of the recipient. And this scale is very interesting because it enables to differentiate mechanisms which are again, which may have the same lawfulness value, but which do not have necessarily the same level of effective compliance information. So if we apply it to the, again, taking Article 46 instrument, you will see that, for instance, if you take a standard contractual clauses, it's something that can be sufficient to transfer data. But if you're a data controller and you're sharing data with a data processor, or if you're a data subject and you rely on the fact that an entity assigned a SCC does not give you any indication or any guarantee that what is committed on the paper is effectively implemented. While if you move to code of conduct, it's already better, and you can even optionally include effective audit. It's not necessarily required, but if you include it in your code of conduct, if you have third parties independent audit, then you have a far stronger. And of course, certification is in all cases the most adequate mechanism to ensure that if a third party is processing data, it is really walking the talk, it is really enforcing and ensuring compliance with the obligation. So maybe Europrivacy, in a few words, as you may know, was born in the European Research Program. It's a result of years of research. We have a sequence of different research projects which have contributed to enrich, to develop it, to refine it, and which has led to the official recognition of Europrivacy as European Data Protection Seal under Article 42 of GDPR by the EDPB. We are currently going, and we'll come back to this in a few minutes, through an extension to have the criteria applicable for Article 46 for international data transfer. And then when you have the criteria on one side recognized, you need also to ensure the enforceability and implementation of the accreditability of the scheme at European level. And for these, we have worked, once we've got the green light from the European Data Protection Board, we have worked with European accreditation through the Italian national accreditation authorities to get Europrivacy endorsed by European accreditation, which means about 46 member states or national authorities for accreditation from 46 member states. And this has been approved a few months ago in March. And since then, we have already a first certification body which has completed this Article 43. As you may know, we had the first European seal delivered a few weeks ago, and we have other certification body going through the process. I know that the next one who will get the accreditation officially, it will be in a couple of weeks, no more, from what we have heard. The process is really reaching to the happy conclusion. So, and we have all the other partners who are working on this process. Article 46. So we have been working also with the European authorities to get Europrivacy endorsed under Article 46. First, the European Data Protection Board had to agree on its own requirements for the use of certification under Article 46. And this has led to official guidelines which were published about a year ago, February 2023. And as soon as it was published, the criteria were already designed to be used under Article 46. We addressed the additional requirements specified by EDPB and submitted a revised version of the criteria to EDPB through the Commission nationale de protection des données, or Luxembourgish supervisory authorities. And we are now in the process. We already had several interactions, and we are in the process to get a new version of the criteria endorsed by EDPB to address the Article 46 requirements, which will mean that we will have a single set of criteria which can be used under Article 42 and 46 of the GDPR. What does an applicant need to be certified, to comply with the GDPR? It's really the most important element. It seems to be obvious, or perhaps a la palissade, but it is indeed the very central element. The whole set of criteria, the whole architecture of Europrivacy has been designed to assess compliance with the regulation, as stated again in Article 42 and Rest 100. So we didn't try to bring some exotic requirements. It means that if a company is already complying with the GDPR, has done everything it needs to do to comply with the GDPR, it can easily start a certification and request a certification of its data processing activities. Then another requirement, which is important, is to have a DPO and a record of data processing activities. And why I mention it, because it's not necessarily required in all cases, but we considered from the scheme perspective that it would not be reasonable to certify data processing if the company or the public administration doesn't have anybody in charge of compliance. We need to have someone in charge of the compliance of the data processing to be certified. And we need to ensure that the entity which requests to certify data processing knows what personal data it is processing. That's why we are so considered that the existence of a record of data processing activities, a registry, a table, but at least that the applicant knows what personal data are processed by the entity is a requirement, is mandatory. And then what you need to do is to document compliance with the Europrivacy criteria. The good news also with the European or the GDPR certification, and I guess it will remain the same also for the UK GDPR. It may be different in other countries. For instance, in Switzerland, with the current federal act, you can certify also management system. But under the GDPR, you can certify only data processing activities. And then the two good news with that is one, it enables to have certification which are more reliable. Indeed, if you have a certification stating that a very large company has been certified, has been complying with the data protection regulation, in general, that is probably not auditable in an effective manner. That is not something that is, you can check that there are procedures in place, but you cannot ensure that the data processing themselves are fully processed in full compliance with the regulation. While if you focus on data processing, it can be different data processing activities related or closely linked together into a target of evaluation, but there you are sure that the auditor will really analyze what is happening with the data processed in this target of evaluation. And the second element, which is very important, that it allows you to put first things first. It means you don't need to be perfectly adequate and compliant with each and every data processing to start a certification. You can indeed use a certification as a mechanism for internal capacity building, for internal enhancement of the compliance policy and strategy you have implemented in your company. And then you can focus on the priority data processing, the one which constitute the highest risk for the data subject or for you as an applicant, and then step by step extending it to all the data processing and focusing again on the processing that really matter for you from a compliance and risk perspective. Then how does it work? You start usually, I think this slide, it's been broken. I'm sorry about it. So usually what you need to do is to start by complying with the regulation. And that's why you have most effort. What you see at the bottom, the blue curve is really the effort. So the good news that before starting the certification, in principle, most of your work has been already accomplished. Then what you need to do is to check and document your compliance using the criteria, which have been approved by, again, being approved by EDPB, it means that you have 30 national authorities which have reviewed this criteria and have agreed that they are adequate to assess compliance with data protection regulation, taking into account not only the European requirements, but also the national requirements. And by doing so, the good news is that you already reduce the risks in terms of compliance or non-compliance. You already identify potential non-conformities. You will also have a clear and comprehensive documentation of your compliance, which means that if there is any audit or inspection, you can already have relevant material to share with your authority. And then once you have documented and validated internally that, yes, we comply with all the criteria, then you can call and request a certification body to come and then to certify. And what is very interesting, and that's an important paradigm shift for DPOs, is that by certifying the compliance of your data processing, you can value the compliance. You can really turn the compliance into something, first of all, which is recognized by third parties. You can really claim that you have really done things right and you have done all what you could to be aligned with the regulation. But then it can be used by the company itself by the sales and marketing teams, for instance. It can be used with shareholders, financial analysts, if it's a publicly traded companies, to demonstrate that the company is really taking seriously the obligation to comply with the regulation, and doing so is contributing to increase the value of the company. And then you need, of course, to maintain, and the idea is really to make it enjoyable and to enjoy the the compliance. In order to do that, so what we did and to make it as enjoyable is to develop different online resources. So we have a public website, we have an online academy where you can learn how to use the scheme, which also enables to homogenize also the capacity building of all the experts, auditors, implementers, or DPOs who want to know how to use it. Everyone gets the same information. You don't need to do the whole program if you're just a DPO. You usually do just the introductory course. But if you are meeting an auditor, he will have the same training as you if you do the complete training for the assessment. And then we have the community website where you find all the relevant information, the template, the resources that you may need. We also developed what we named a welcome pack, which is a package of service, a bundle of services which really enable DPOs who would like to start preparing the data processing for certification with a whole set of services for 3 years for the first life cycle of the first certification. Value proposition. So there are different elements which are particularly important. I will not dive into the details of each one, but I would say, of course, as we mentioned, to identify and reduce the legal and financial risk, to check and demonstrate compliance, to improve reputation and access to markets, to build trust and confidence. And we often stress these two words which are distinct. One is about building trust towards third parties, but the other one is also if you are DPO or the CEO of a company, to ensure that we as a company are doing the things as they should be. We are doing things right. And this notion of confidence is very important. We know that indeed that some companies have embraced Europrivacy to validate the complaints internally, not to communicate it externally. And that's quite interesting too. There is also the possibility with Europrivacy to extend Europrivacy to non-EU jurisdictions. So we already worked with including the ICO and, for instance, the Swiss Federal Department of Justice and the Swiss Supervisory Authority or Data Protection Authorities to get the criteria recognized under Swiss regulations. And we are working with different authorities with a few complementary criteria to address the specific obligations of each jurisdictions. It develops competitive advantage. We discussed already the value creation. Again, it has been designed to facilitate cross-border and processor data transfer. Again, for cross-border, we are still waiting for the complementary validation by EDPB for Article 46. As for the possibility to receive continuous regulatory updates, and last but not least, the fact that the criteria are legally recognized by 30 countries, all EU and EEA member states. Some characteristics, again, I will not go through all of them, but I would say one element is, for instance, that it is continuously updated, which is important. So the fact that it has been developed to be very time and cost efficient, working a lot, also to integrate emerging technologies. So if you have a data processing using artificial intelligence or blockchain or Internet of Things, we have a few complementary criteria to assess the technology-specific risks and obligations regarding personal data protection. So very efficient. And last but not least, I would say it is supported by a very large ecosystem of qualified partners and experts. Now, what is the intersection of GDPR certification or Europrivacy with national privacy law? First of all, we have developed in the context of Europrivacy what we named the National Obligation Conformity Assessment Report, the NORCAR. And that's something that can be used to demonstrate, to assess and demonstrate compliance with the national obligation, complementary national obligation of data processing. Something we developed and worked in close interaction with EDPB, in particular to clarify what should be in the report, how to structure it. And we also provide on the community website not only templates to do it, but also for each and every EEA jurisdictions, EU and EEA jurisdiction, summary of the main national obligation for personal data protection obligation. So the idea is really to facilitate compliance for all parties and to make it really efficient. Now, what we did, as I mentioned before, we have worked on what we name extensions. So we have currently two national extensions for Switzerland and UK, which are in the process to be finalized and finally recognized. We already have for one of them a formal validation and informal validation, but we are waiting now for the publication of the opinion of EDPB for Article 46 to really finalize it, to formalize it. And we are working as on other national jurisdiction. And the idea is that you can use the Europrivacy criteria to assess compliance with the EU GDPR, but then instead of using another scheme to assess the compliance with another national regulation, we use the same core set of criteria for the GDPR, and we complement it with the potential additional obligations you may find in the UK GDPR and the Federal Act on Data Protection or other regulations. Then another development which is ongoing, but which has been evolved quite a lot. We started 3 years ago a European research project with our partner from IoT Lab named TrustAware, through which we started to work on a model of certification that would be very much aligned with the European Data Protection Seal, with Europrivacy, but which could be endorsed, not only used, but endorsed by non-EU countries or jurisdictions. And the idea was to work on a model where we can address not only the GDPR requirements, but also the requirements of Convention 108 plus of the Council of Europe and the global CBPR forum requirements, where you have different requirements which aim at the same objectives, but with different requirements. And we have worked on a model which would be fully interoperable between Europe and non-European countries. And this is something we are working on. There will be important information released in a near future. It's a lot ongoing, but for the time being, I must remain very, very high level. And but that is something we are working on. Again, our ambition at the European Center for Certification and Privacy, it's really to bring research and innovation to support compliance and data protection. Some challenges and advantages for businesses operating in multiple European countries. That's another question which was asked by our dear host. Let's say that there are few challenges that we need to address when you want to comply with regulations across different jurisdictions. The first element, obviously, is the fact that we have heterogeneous regulations. And then even with the UK GDPR, it is evolving, there will be some differences, and over time, it will have its own specific requirements addressing its specific expectations or national approach to data protection. It is also very difficult in general to assess the effective level of compliance across border, even whether you are a company or a supervisory authority. Data protection authorities cannot just say, oh, I will go in another country to check if the company is complying with the regulation. It's not doable. So you have a fundamental issue related to the legitimate respect of sovereignty of Article 1 of the UN Charter. And then you have the risk of digital space and market fragmentation if we don't find a way to overcome this fragmentation. So as we mentioned, the jurisdictions limits the fact that you cannot just go and check things, whether you're an authority or a company, as you wish. You have to respect the sovereignty and restrictions that may exist in other jurisdictions. The interest of developing and working on common criteria and having a scheme which is recognized by different jurisdictions is that you already overcome a lot of this heterogeneity fragmentation. But it also means, and that's what we try to do with Europrivacy, that you can have criteria that can be used also directly by non-EU, non-EA authorities on a fair and equal fit. So it's not that we are imposing criteria from one side to the other side, but the work we are doing now is really to ensure that we can use equivalent criteria across different jurisdictions, European and non-European jurisdictions. And that's quite important. And for the European Data Protection Seal, which is already in place, it ensures that if you are working and documenting your compliance with the regulation, you are using criteria, again, which have been recognized by all the 30 members of the European Union and European Economic Area. And then you have also the benefit of being able to use this certification typically under Article 28 for transfer of data between controller and processors. And as soon as we will get also the Article 46 endorsement for the revised version of the criteria, the possibility to use the criteria for international data transfers. Now, another element which is important to highlight is the fact that you have different level of trust. So you can use different kind of criteria or policy. So you can develop your homemade controls, checks and controls to assess your level of compliance. And this is important. That can be that has the advantage that you can tailor your requirements or checks and controls to your own reality, to your specific reality and specific needs. But it will be usually considered as something useful, but difficult to convince authority that your criteria were the right criteria. And they may question even the choice of your criteria, the wording, or the approach, the methodology. So it can be challenged by an authority very easily as being potentially very subjective. And whatever the quality itself of the system you set in place. Then if you use standards, it's quite better because you have then criteria which have been reviewed and supported by different stakeholders. So you have a consensus among different experts to say these are the correct criteria to be used. That's quite already better than developing your own recipe. But of course, for the authority, it's still something which is nice, but which has no value, formally speaking, under the GDPR. It doesn't address Article 42 requirements. It's not recognized under Article 42. And that's why, again, using criteria to document your compliance, even if you don't want to be certified, but using criteria which have been legally endorsed by the authorities is a very important advantage in terms of trust, reliability, and reducing the uncertainty when you will be interacting either with data subjects, with other stakeholders, or with the authorities. Strategies for utilizing Europrivacy to address multiple demands. And that's an important point. One of the elements that is very interesting that if you are a data processor and you are working with different data controllers, in principle, each data controller should check if the data processor is fully aligned with its obligation under GDPR, if it has established adequate technological and organizational measures. So you need to organize regular audits, to perform due diligence controls. It's a burden for both sides. And let's imagine you have a data processor with 10 controllers, 10 clients. It means 10 audits, 10 due diligence. It requires work from the data controllers to organize it, to assess it, the responsibility to do it right. And then the data processor will need to host 10 visits, due diligence controls. They will spend a lot of time to receive experts auditor to check that what they are doing is really correct. If not, the data controller, if there is any issue, any problem with the processing on the data processor side, the data controller remains liable and responsible of breach of the GDPR by the data processor. So it's a huge responsibility. It's really extending substantially the surface of risk for the controllers. And under Article 28 of the GDPR, this is a fundamental aspect on paradigm shift with the GDPR. Then now let's imagine that you have not only one data processor, but 2 data processors, and then 3 data processors, and 10 data processors. Just imagine the burden for the data controller. Let's imagine you are working with 10 data processors. You need a dedicated team just to monitor the compliance of your data processor. And that's where, again, you can choose between having, let's say, 10 controllers using 10 processors. It means 100 direct controls and due diligence operations, or only 10 certification. And that illustrates how powerful is a certification, because with the certification, you just need to certify the data processing once to reassure the different data controllers that they're using an adequate solution providers. Then more generally, I would say a simple aspect as data controllers are responsible and liable for the non-compliance of the data processor to which they share personal data. Something that any data controller can do at no cost is to request its data providers to be certified. And we anticipate that more and more, we are at the very beginning. Again, we got the first European seal delivered a few weeks ago. Now it will come. We will wait. I think first year we will have first wave of front runners, companies which are interested to reduce the risk. But as soon as companies will realize that they can use solution providers who are certified, they will of course prefer this option because that reduces their surface of risk. It reduces the risk that a data controller be fined because its data processor had a data breach or a data leak. So that is something that will come naturally. And again, as a data controller, you can already anticipate to have a strategy to progressively request your data processor to be certified just to reduce the risk for you. And then the beauty of it is that for your service providers, it will constitute a competitive advantage on the market. So it's win-win. How Europrivacy certification helps unify compliance efforts across borders. So already mentioned different approaches and the fact that you have already within the EU and EA for 30 countries now common criteria which have been approved by EDPB as adequate for 30 different countries, different national jurisdictions. Now, beyond Europe, what we are doing, we work a lot on mapping. So we already have with Europrivacy criteria, since years we are working on mapping with different standards, different regulations. This is just a very short extract of different norms and standards like APEC, CBPR, Global CBPR Forum, Convention 108 plus of the Council of Europe, the EU-US DPFP, the Malabo Convention, and so on. And then we have a clear mapping. So already when we developed the criteria for Europrivacy, we were already working with the perspective to have something that could also make sense for non-EU jurisdictions. So really to have a set of criteria which can be used globally. And we are working currently on different interoperability mechanisms between Europrivacy and other norms. So we work a lot on the mapping. And then when you use the Europrivacy criteria, you can use in the community website, we have a certain number of mappings which are provided. So if you want to demonstrate compliance with a Californian data protection regulation or other regulation, you can easily identify what would be potential gaps, or we have formal criteria. And as I mentioned before, interprivacy is very much about it. It's to propose and deliver a set of criteria which can be used worldwide with the same level of quality and requirements and protection and compliance as Europrivacy, but in a non-geographic centric approach. So in a geographically neutral version of our criteria. And then you find, of course, on the community website, a whole set of resources also to support compliance with specific national regulations, with profiles for a certain number of countries where you identify the main national regulatory obligations. We're working also on a new tool that we will announce in the near future, which will be a surprise, but let's keep it for a little bit later, probably September, we will have a really nice news, which will facilitate a lot of work of DPOs and compliance officers. Again, one of our ambition, it's not a marketing slogan, not at all. It's really something we take seriously, even if some people think that we are joking when they hear that. We really want to make compliance enjoyable. And that's really something we take very seriously because we think that the more we can facilitate the work of DPOs, the more compliance will be effective, the more data subject will be protected. And it's a win-win-win approach. And if you want the compliance, the data protection compliance to be respected, it is important to facilitate the work of the DPOs, of all those who are in charge of this compliance. So that's something we take very seriously. We have also the possibility to get qualified as in the Europrivacy Online Academy if you want to know to learn it. But the other interest with that is that it enables experts to learn how to use Europrivacy regardless of the location. So it's also a way to avoid geographic barriers, to ensure that a DPO, if you have a European companies, for instance, and one of the DPO is based in Japan or Indonesia, or if they want to understand how it works, they can already get trained, and they will get exactly the same level of qualification as their peers in Europe or in Brussels or wherever. We have the whole ecosystem of official Europrivacy partners, and that's very important. We have the chance, and I want to thank our official partners. We have a process where we recognize companies, law firms, certification bodies as official partners. They need to apply. It's a very selective process, I have to say. But once they are recognized as adequate, having the adequate level of expertise, track record, reputation, human resources to really deliver a high quality service, then once they are recognized as official partners, they have free access to all the resources of Europrivacy. And this ecosystem of official Europrivacy partners encompass, I would say, three main categories beyond, I would say, the research partner, the authority, the expert, but we have three main categories. We have partners who are acting as implementers, mainly law firms and consulting firms that can help their clients to prepare the data processing to certification. We have the chance to have the largest law firms and consulting firms in the world as official partner, which means that they can cover all European countries and non-European countries. We have the same for solution providers. So you have companies like OneTrust, SAP, Smart Global Governance, which have solutions to document compliance with regulations and which have been accepted as official partner to include into the solution directly the criteria, Europrivacy criteria, so that their clients can directly document the compliance with these existing solutions. They can, of course, use their own solution, or they can use Excel files, or there are different ways to do it. But if they are using, for instance, already OneTrust or Smart Global Governance or SAP solution, it may be very convenient to be able to use your usual software environment to document your compliance. And then last but not least, we have also the largest certification bodies like, again, SGS, BSI, DNV, and others. And they are currently going through Article 43, but they are all highly motivated to support and deliver Europrivacy to the market. Maybe a last element, one thing we do also from our side is to try to support as much as possible, not only the development from the research side of interesting tools and instruments or criteria or schemes. We are typically currently working on a new set of schemes for Artificial Intelligence Act, European Health Data Space Data Act, and other regulations. But what we do is also to support and encourage international dialogue. So ECCP is also actively supporting the Privacy Symposium, together with the Foundation Monde International, the European Law Student Association, the Council of Europe, the European Cybersecurity Organization, the European Federation of DPOs, and so on. And the idea of the Privacy Symposium is really to support international dialogue. And typically in the area of certification, what we try to do is to facilitate dialogue between European authorities, non-European authorities, to see how certification could evolve, how we could better address the needs and requirements from the different countries or jurisdictions, and to make things as interoperable, as efficient, and as impactful as possible. So you are welcome to write down the dates of the next edition. We just had the last one 1 month ago, but the next edition will be in May 2025 from May 12 to 16 in Venice. And that can be a very good opportunity to engage and discuss and to facilitate, again, the dialogue, the evolution of data protection certification, not only or I would say all criteria or standards, but more generally as an approach, policy, strategies to make data protection more easily accessible and more impactful, more recognized globally. leveraging the cyber compliant platform for Europrivacy certification. Then I will pass the token to my colleagues to continue the presentation. Just let me, Alan, if when you want me to move to the next slides. And again, IT governance is one of our official partners, and we're very happy to join this webinar to contribute to this presentation.
Sébastien, thank you. That's been very interesting. We've got a whole lot of questions which have come up during your presentation. I'm briefly going to, ladies and gentlemen, just introduce you to CyberComply, which is a cloud-based platform that enables you not only to deal with Europrivacy, but also with ISO 27001 in a single integrated environment. When you get the set of slides, which will be circulated after the presentation, you'll be able to read more about CyberComply, about how that solution can work and how it can simplify the route towards achieving and maintaining Europrivacy certification. I'm going to stop there because I want to move into the series of questions which you've raised during the period of what Sébastien has been saying. So the first question which came up was, are you an Article 42 GDPR accredited certification authority? If so, accredited in which European management system? And then the third part of the question is the Luxembourg DPA says certifications issued under its authority can only be granted to companies established in Luxembourg, which I guess is by extension, does that mean that you can certify companies throughout the European Union? That's your first question.
Yeah, absolutely. So very good question. So let me clarify. You need to consider you have three or at least two distinct articles in the GDPR. Article 42 is to recognize criteria, and you have two ways to recognize criteria in the GDPR, either at national level, and we have, I think, 3 national schemes which have been approved on specific aspects, and but whose criteria are recognized by the national supervisory authority of the given country, and which can be used only in the very country where they have been approved at national level. And then there is a European Data Protection Seal under Article 42, which is Europrivacy, and which is recognized as applicable all over Europe. Over the across all EU and European Economic Areas countries, jurisdictions. And in all these countries, the Europrivacy article or criteria are recognized as adequate under the GDPR. So you can use your privacy criteria in any one of these countries to deliver certification. The criteria are validated under Article 42 all over Europe. And us, as European Center for Certification of Privacy, we're acting as scheme owner, which means we update the criteria, but we do not deliver certification ourselves. The certification then to be delivered, you need to have a certification body recognized under Article 43 of the GDPR, so which has received by its national authority the competence, the qualification, the recognized qualification to deliver a certification under GDPR. And that's why for Article 43, we have worked with European accreditation. It took quite some time, but now we have a validation of the accreditability procedure, accreditability of Europrivacy across all European accreditation authorities, including, by the way, non-EU like UK or Switzerland. And then in order to deliver certification, a certification body needs to request this Article 43 accreditation in one of the EEA jurisdictions. Once it gets the accreditation in any one of the EEA jurisdictions, so let's imagine, to make it very clear, we are a scheme owner based in Luxembourg. Our criteria have been approved. Now you have a certification body, let's say in Italy, which wants to be deliver certification. It goes to the National Accreditation Authority of Italy, Accredia, or to the Supervisory Authority, Il Garante, in Italy, and say, okay, I would like to get an accreditation under Article 43. Then they will discuss and they will need to fill an application to Accredia, the National Accreditation Authority in Italy. And then when they go through the process, when they completed the process, they will get the formal accreditation under Article 43. Once this certification body in Italy, which is using criteria which have been developed in Luxembourg, wants to deliver a certification in any other European countries, it is qualified to do so. So the certification body which gets the accreditation in Italy can deliver certification in France, in Slovenia, in Finland, in Spain, in Germany, all over Europe. The only condition is that the decision to deliver the certification must be made in the country where the certification body has obtained its accreditation. That's the only thing. And then it will be the certification body will be under the monitoring of the National Authority of Italy, even if the certificate is delivered to a company based in Germany or France or Spain or Portugal or Ireland or whatever. So it's very, very interoperable. So today, again, we already have a first certification body which has been accredited. So it's a TAMCERT in Hungary, by the Hungarian accreditation authorities. We have the other certification bodies, so like DNV, SGS, VSI, and others are really in the process of getting it. I know that one of them will get its procedure completed in Italy probably within a few weeks. It's not official yet, but we are waiting, of course, the formal decision, but it seems to be on good track to get it. And the others one are working. We don't have all information. We know that things are moving very actively on this front. And we can expect that by September, there will be already quite a few certification bodies that will have completed their accreditation and will be able to deliver certification all over Europe. So it gives the freedom for company to choose among different service offering and to avoid monopolistic situation or situation where there would be a kind of lock-in for the companies which are interested in certification. And then there was a question for management system, if I remember well. So under the GDPR, again, you cannot certify a management system. That's not recognized under GDPR under Article 42 and 43. It has to be a certification of data processing, but Europrivacy in its architecture has integrated as so, because the idea is not to compete against other schemes, it's to complement what has been successful on the market. And in particular, we have worked a lot with ISO when we developed Europrivacy criteria to make it as much aligned as possible with ISO standards, to also synergize with the ISO community, to collaborate, to engage, and to comply, to be as interoperable as possible with the different ISO standards and requirements. And what we did is under Europrivacy, if you have a client which has an active and valid ISO 27001 certification, this is recognized by Europrivacy as equivalent to a subset of criteria we have if the target of evaluation is not a high-risk data processing, which means that, for instance, if you have a management system certification, then if you're not processing high-risk, if it's not a high-risk data processing like medical data or data of minors of age, and there's a clear definition in Europrivacy scheme, then you can shorten a little bit your certification under Europrivacy, because it makes no sense to repeat the same checks and controls if it has been done, in particular for SME, if it has already ISO 27001 certification, then it enables to have a Europrivacy certification, the data processing they want to certify, which is a little bit shorter and time efficient.
Very good. Thank you. The next question, which has been answered, but just for everybody else's benefit, the question was, does Europrivacy certification apply in the UK? Does it work under UK laws? And I think in your earlier answer to the first question, you effectively said, yes, it works in any country which is party to the scheme.
Yeah, to be completely transparent. So initially, when UK, following the Brexit, the UK GDPR was a kind of copy and paste of the European GDPR. But very quickly, there was a decision from UK to see where could the GDPR be improved. And so there are a certain number of specific differences. So we have been working with ICO quite a lot to have specific extensions of Europrivacy. I would say the regular Europrivacy certification for EU to address the UK GDPR specific obligations. And then we have worked on it. So we have an extension for UK, which is ready, but we're still waiting. So we had a few points to finalize with ICO. And as we are now working on the Article 46 with the EDPB, we decided to put a little bit on hold the publication, the finalization of the approval and publication of the extension for UK by ICO until we get the Article 46 publication. But as soon as it will be done, in principle, very soon after, we hope to be able to publish the extensions approved by ICO. So it's work in progress. But fundamentally, what we have as informal status currently is that the criteria we have, of course, for the EU GDPR, I would say 99% aligned with the UK GDPR, and there are just a few specific elements, and there are a few elements that need still to be discussed regarding the recognition of accreditation under Article 43, because the EU GDPR sets very strict constraints regarding what country can deliver an Article 43. But there is a possibility then to use the criteria directly under a UK regulation. That could be also a possibility. So that's something which is also work in progress, not only on our side, but among the authorities as well, I would say.
Very good. Thank you. And then the next question, can the DPO for Europrivacy certification be a third-party DPO, in other words, an external data protection officer as a service?
Yeah, so for us, there is no problem if the DPO of the applicant, so we use the term applicant to refer to a company or a public administration which is applying for a certification and which can then have a data processing certified dog. The applicant needs to have a DPO, but it can be an external DPO. The point is that there were a discussion within the International Board of Experts to say it's not required to have a DPO for small SMEs and so on, but there was a consensus in the Board of Experts to say, yes, but even if it's not legally required, it's not reasonable, it would not be reasonable to certify data processing under the responsibility of a company which has nobody in charge of compliance. And we thought there must be someone in charge. It can be internal, it can be external, but there must be someone who takes the responsibility to assume the role and function of DPO. It can have a different name, title, but the reality, the key element is that there must be someone in charge of compliance, of monitoring compliance, of the data processing to be certified.
Thank you. How does Europrivacy certification cover third-party processes is the next question.
Very
What
clearly.
happens when the controller engages a new data processor?
Absolutely. So that's very simple. We focus really on the obligations of the legal obligation, and we assess that if you engage a new processor in or if you already have 3 processors interacting with your data processing, then we ensure that you comply with Article 28 GDPR, that you have contracts. The certification will assess that you have that you comply with all the obligations of the GDPR, all the relevant obligations of the GDPR to demonstrate your compliance with the different obligations. So typically under Article 28 in this case. So you need to ensure that you comply with the law. So to have a data processor or processing agreement, it needs to comply with the obligation of the GDPR. And the criteria will be here to check that you effectively comply with the obligation. There's no magic in it.
Sadly, there's no magic in anything that involves compliance. One just has to
understand
the requirements and get on with it. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to midday British summertime, 1 o'clock European summertime, and that's the targeted end of today's webinar. So I'd like to thank all of you for being on the session today. I hope you found it useful. I hope there's been a lot of information there that you can use. Please do come back to us. You can see our 3 websites there in the UK, in the Europe, and in the US. You can get hold of us on the website by email or telephone call, we can help you tackle Europrivacy compliance, get you headed in the right direction. And Sébastien, thank you very much for your time today. That's been a most interesting, fascinating, and useful hour in your company. Folks,
Thank
thank
you
you
very
all. I hope
much.
you have a secure and compliant rest of this week.
Thank you very much. And again, we are available if you need anything, any information, if you have requests or if you need to know more. You can go on Europrivacy website. And again, it's a great pleasure to collaborate and to have joined this webinar. And we wish you all an excellent summertime.
Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.